How would you define cross-cultural marriage?
Me dating my husband wasn't easily accepted.
Sure.
Because we come from different tribes, and
Sure.
the tribes that clash the most from this country.
Africans, if you go wrong, whatever is in the sight of your mother or father, it will land on you.
I was with my mother-in-law, and she's like, no, you need to speak the mother tongue. And I'm like, all right, so mother tongue. Jaleesa, you really need to pray before you give the baby the breast milk. And I was like,
she got the light in her life. Her love never fails. She lives to walk right. And through her trials, so much grace. So much grace. So much grace. So much grace.
The topic of today is, actually, before we dive into that, question of the day. I have one for you guys, and I want you guys to be honest, okay? So if you could get rid of one materialistic thing that you own, what would it be and why?
Wow.
that's not the question you said you were going to ask.
No. I think for me, maybe, I don't know, I feel I only see this answer. I think my phone. I think phones.
Okay.
Because I think sometimes we can spend so much time like on the phone, on our phones and everything, and we forget to really connect with people. Because I'm trying to think of how, like, even our parents did it back in the day. Like, they used to have the pay phones, and it wasn't everywhere. So I think the phone. Yeah.
Phone. What about you, Kadzo?
I'm torn between the TV and my phone. But I know if I got rid of the TV, my husband would feel very affected. So, also my phone, I don't know, because either way, it's always lost most of the time.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Just
hilarious.
Where's my phone? Flash me. Everyone in my house, like, cozy. Even my nanny's like, wake a ringtone. Because she's
like, we're done, we're tired.
Like, "Yeah, why don't you have a ringtone?" I'm just like, because it's annoying. Just like, so now, and my husband gets frustrated because, like, so now we just have to all keep quiet and listen for a vibration.
Are you one of those people who, like, your friends call you and you don't pick up because you don't hear your phone?
Yeah.
Because I don't know where my phone is.
Yeah. I'm actually like, I was telling, like, my husband also complains the same thing. Like, I'm always losing my phone. So I think ever since I became a parent, I really don't care about, like, I'll use my phone, yes, but most of the time, I really don't know where my phone is.
But you both have Apple Watches, so
This is a
Apple Watch
so it's not connected.
Yeah,
okay, I'm like,
So mine is, so what happens is, I know.
Okay, what's your excuse?
Now I know, because if it vibrates, if my watch vibrates, I know my phone is somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's not helpful.
Yeah.
What about you, Jaleesa?
So I got off social media a while ago, so I feel like my phone's not really stressing me.
Yeah.
But I had the same situation. Yeah. But that's why I got off social media. So I think maybe for me, I'm always trying to reduce the amount of just things I have in general. So something that I really value is just like having less, because I've had to move a lot. And I noticed, like, every time I have to move, the more stuff I have, the harder it is to move. I just, like, I'm always trying to, like, par down. So I would just probably try to see, like, can I survive on, like, X amount of clothes? And then because, like, even now when I look in my closet, I'm like, I haven't worn these things in a year, right? And they're still there. So sometimes whenever I think about material things, I'm always like, the things that I can see, which clothes becomes like the first thing. Okay. So I feel like I would just try to pare down on that.
That's a good discipline.
Yeah.
That's a good discipline.
Yeah.
I think for me it would be my dining table.
Your dining table?
Yeah.
You just don't want it. I hope Gabe's paying attention. No
Like,
table.
one day if you come home and there's no dining table, it's because it's so. But I feel like it's because a lot of conversations happen on the couch. Like, for me, I would even rather, and I know this is not everyone, and sometimes it's even a pet peeve for most people, but I'd rather eat my food on the couch
Then on the table.
than on the dining table. And I know it can be a little gross for most people, but I don't know. There's just something about, I am weirdly obsessed with sofas. I don't know why, but it's like I get so giddy and happy when I have a nice sofa.
That's why your sofa is so comfortable.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a weird thing for sofas.
Yeah.
And I would rather not have anything else in the house, but have a sofa.
That's weird.
It's weird, right? I'll dig deep and talk to my therapist
about what's going on with that.
and figure out why.
Yeah.
But my dining table, because I can be fine with having conversations on the couch, eating, a meal on the couch, having my kids play with me as we sit on the couch or the floor. But my dining table also is not as comfortable. So
That's true.
there's also that.
We sell your dining table. and
Right.
get you another couch.
Well, talk to my husband because he loves his dining table. Anyway, let's dig deep into the topic of today. How would you define cross-cultural marriage? Or how would you define, I don't know, context, we're from different tribes, like our spouses are from different tribes, and Jalisa and I happen to be in a cross-cultural marriage. So I know that will trickle down to mesh well with each other, but how would you guys describe, cross-cultural marriage?
I think for you guys, it's cross-cultural across the continent.
Sure.
Yeah. But I think for Kadzo and I, it's cross-cultural in the country because me and my husband are from different tribes. So I think that's the aspect of cross-cultural marriage is.
Yeah.
You come from different tribes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me see that. I think in our context now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other different opinion?
For me, I think it also includes language, right? Difference of language, difference of upbringing. So for me being from the US and my husband being from Uganda, we have totally different ways that we shower, like feed, like go to school, like all of these things are just, when I say like, let's eat, like the image that comes in that person's head can be different. Does that make sense? So I think cross-cultural is like when literally we're using the same English phrase and like there's a different like kind of background file that we have that like appears. And so that's really where the like merging comes from. So
I don't know if this happens to people who have a marriage where they're from different tribes, where it's like you would say something in a different I don't know if I should say accent, or you would say a certain word differently from your spouse.
Yes.
And you have your kids and you're teaching them certain words. And let's say, for example, I can say water and Gabe can say water. And then, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So with different tribes or different, cross-cultural elements, how does that affect how you parent? Or does it affect how you parent?
I don't know. I think our parenting style is mostly personality.
More so than culture.
More than culture.
Yeah.
what do you mean by that?
For example, I'm very I think how I choose to handle even when my son is throwing his tantrums is I'm like, I calm down. I'm like, okay, we are having a big moment. So now let's deal with this. So he's up here and I'm here. And his dad is like, why are you just here? And he's... so there's that...
Energy.
For him, he's like, no, if he's raising his voice, even you go harm. He needs to know the parent is... So there's that... personality. Our personalities are very different in that aspect. But also, I think how I was raised, my mom was loud.
Okay.
And I've not in, she wasn't terrible, but she'd shout here and there. Until now, I don't like being shouted at.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, because what I realized now, I think when I was growing up is, even till today, when we have a really huge argument, I shut down. So, there was a time I don't know what Stando did. I was just so upset. And I shouted at him and he just stopped, looked at me and bawled. Like he cried. like you could just see the heartbreak. And I'm like, what's wrong? And he's like, Mommy, you're shouting at me. That thing wrecked me. I think from that day on.
Talk about mom guilt.
From that day on, I was like, no. I don't shout at him, even when he's done something wrong. His dad, now and then, I told him about it so bad, and then he forgets based on how his day has been. So, I think that's how I'd put it. And even if I'd add culture, maybe could say, I'd talk about maybe the upbringing aspect. But not traditional. This is how Kikuyus raise their kids. This is how Giriamas raise their kids. Because also we didn't necessarily grow up in traditional homes. Like they aren't so, I don't know, what's the word? They aren't so rooted in tradition.
Right.
They're those guys who they're like, this is what we do from the time you're a child. So as a Kikuyu, this is how we nani, this is what we do, this is what we do, this is how we do it. But for us, our parents were also more, I guess, traveled, more exposed. So
that makes sense.
I like that. For us, I see the difference in, I think, discipline and what to do when you're supposed to do something, right? Like for me, I am I don't know how to describe the type of disciplinarian I am, but sometimes sometimes I actually let my emotions or anger take over. So even when I'm dealing with my children, sometimes that tends to come out. But I think for my husband, he's more of, for example, like if your child hasn't eaten, he will just be like, leave him alone. I'm like, no, you have to eat. Like you have to eat. And I know it's not the best thing. But that's now where I see the difference. I see the difference in how we discipline mostly. I think that's when you can actually tell how these two are raised up was very, very different. But now in terms of like the things, and even certain things, like Rob isn't really like someone who is in the kitchen a lot. So he never cooked as much and things like that. So that's also something else that I noticed. But I think foundation-wise, I agree with what Kadzo is. Like we've not let our differences, like in culture, be the basis of be the foundation of our marriage. Like for us, our foundation is Christ. That
makes sense.
I think that even though it's cross-cultural to an extent, you guys are still coming from the similar culture because you're both Kenyan, right? So like there's like a lot of things about schooling, about language that's just like in Kenya in general, about like how you commute, like traffic, like all these things, like you guys are on the same level because you just came from the same context. Does that make sense? Where Joel was born and raised in Uganda, and so I was born and raised in the U.S. And so thankfully, I feel very fortunate because when we met, he'd already been in the U.S. for about 4 years. So he'd acclimated a bit, right? He wasn't just like fresh to the U.S. and we met, because then I think that would have even been more different. So there's a lot that he acclimated to by coming that influences where we are now. But our son's only 5 months. And so now that we have this little baby, we're thinking about things in a way that, or we've had conversations and discussions about, okay, so for example, I don't speak any Ugandan language and he speaks multiple. Now we have this son that I want to identify as Ugandan American. So now I'm like, how do I infuse that when we live not in Uganda, right? So I think those are some of the things that for us, when it comes to cross-cultural parenting, so for me, I'm like, okay, maybe I need to pick up a Ugandan language, but then it's like you've got your tribal language, like your mother tongue, right? And then you've got the like language of the country. So for example, Joel is a Japadola, and so they speak Jap, but then in Uganda, everybody speaks Luganda, which is like something that's like more accessible. And then they also speak English. And so of course we both speak English. But then the conversation has been, do we learn your mother tongue that your mom taught you? Or do we learn just like one that I can learn more easily so that I can reinforce it totally different space. So like those are some of the things that we kind of talk about and that we're like trying to navigate through when it comes to like, you know, like discipline and how we bathe and things like that. Some of those things come up to you. It's like, oh, wash the baby like this. And I'm like, well, I wash the baby like this. It's fine. He's clean, you know? But then it's like, again, that innate upbringing, like it's different. So those are just some of the things that we've been processing through that I don't think we found answers to. But fun fact, Joel's mom was just here in Kenya with us. And so she's like, no, you need to speak the mother tongue. And I'm like, all right. So mother tongue, you know, so I guess I'm learning Jap. And so we're just in the waters of that right now.
That's so interesting hearing you guys say that, because I see how cross-cultural marriage trickles down to discipline and how you just even raise up your kids. And I think one of the with Gabe and I, like fortunate enough, Gabe was also has been in Kenya for a good bit, in my context, for a good bit before we got married. So he did understand the Kenyan culture, tradition. So there are a few things that I feel like I got, you know, like he got acclimated to that helped our marriage till date. Wasn't as new. But it's like, I think one of the things for Gabriel and I, it's when it comes to, when I think of culture and discipline, like how I notice, being in the US, how I notice Americans discipline their kids, it's not really physical. Like it's more, at least from the few or from majority that I've seen, it's usually never, the first thing I'll do is pick up a mwiko or slippers or throw at you, whatever is, you know, that's near your side. So I think, you know, seeing that and then knowing how, like with how I grew up, that was completely different. Polar opposites. Like, what Kenya? Like, you know, Africans, if you go wrong, whatever is in the sight of your mother or father, it will land on you. It will land. So with disciplining Eden and Zoe, for us, it took a while for me to, let me say, adjust to wanting to do things differently, because my innate nature was to react until I realized that a lot of the times with how even I grew up, a part of me was traumatized to do certain things because I was scared of the repercussion. So I think something that I'm learning from Gabe, him being from another culture and that being so pressed on more so than the hardcore discipline, is sometimes it's even though it is, my husband is a believer, obviously, so because in as much as it is wrapped up in grace, it's also cultural in a sense, because he would rather calm down, and maybe it's also his personality infused into that, but he would rather have a calm, he would be overwhelmed, he would be frustrated, he would be aggravated, but how he goes about it would be in a calm manner. So me watching him do that showed me that, okay, I can do things differently from how I was raised. And I think, and maybe one day we'll talk about gentle parenting versus, you know, one day. But I think that really taught me that how I was raised is not as I can also make adjustments to things as well. That brings you to the next question. What would you guys, is there a balance? Do you guys think there's a balance? How can your husbands, and being from different tribes or countries, what balance can we find when it comes to parenting our kids? Is there a balance?
I think there's a balance. So this week, Rob and I listen to a lot of podcasts, like we really do. So there's one podcast we're listening to this week, and they were talking about love. And I think this is something that person said that I had never seen. Like, I think sometimes when you're in marriage, when your spouse calls out something in you, you feel like this person, we tend to feel attacked by your spouses, and I know we've all gone through that. It's like you feel like this person is attacking me. But now what that person was saying is that instead of us viewing it as an attack, why don't we see it as them trying to teach us something? Like, for example, in your situation, you saw how Gabe is gentler with the kids versus what you'd normally do for yourself. So that is maybe an aspect of a strength that he has that is actually teaching you that strength. So for me, I think it's the place of seeing what your spouse is good as a teaching moment for you. It's not easy, but seeing it as a teaching moment. I think for me, I'd say there is a balance, yes, and teaching it and seeing whatever they're doing as a teachable moment. And then also going back to why are we, what is the foundation of us parenting? Like, what's our vision as a family? What's our vision for our kids? What's the vision that we are trying to teach these kids? So there are some times that one person will be stronger than the other, and there are times the same thing, and one person will fall short, and again the other person will fall short.
That makes sense.
There's a book that I've been going through, and it's like a parenting book. What I liked about it, okay, just because it talks about now parenting, it's church book, parenting book. So it's like I know a bunch of churches are using it for their parenting classes, and one of the things that really stood out for me was when trying to create the balance of parenting, because dads and moms will parent differently. Kids will behave differently with their moms than their dads. So most of the time, dad will say, "You stop." They stop. Me, you stop. 50 times. Where? You can't even say it in French, 50 languages. Like Tando, I can tell him things. I can tell him until now that I'm like, what have I said? And he'll repeat what I've told him.
And do the opposite.
Yeah, like, so I'd even start telling him, use your ears too. He's like, listen. And then he'll consider if they listen or not. So seeing that, how kids tend to act the worst around their moms and then their dads, what I learned from that book was it's important to have a baseline as parents. And basically, have your non-negotiables. So Eddie and I, like, our non-negotiables are shouting, screaming, and hitting. If you shout at your auntie or your mom, or just shouting like for no reason because you're upset, there's going to be a consequence. If you're hitting other people, there's going to be a consequence. And he knows. So now having those non-negotiables as a couple will help even in terms of discipline. So now like there's, as much as there's no worst sin than the other, but it just helps, like, if he does these two things, he knows this is the consequence. And if he does something else that's just maybe minor, pouring water, being naughty, those small offenses that kids do, then we can just take him away from the problem. Like, this is what you've done, no, move here, what. So it helps us also just balance and it helps us find a common ground where we're disciplining, but we're not breaking his spirit. Because we also can't say no to everything.
Yes.
If we raise him saying no to everything, then he'll be afraid of everything. And it's like, if I do this, I'll get in trouble. If I do this, but if you know, like, these are the big 10 sins. Because even us, generally, we have the things that God doesn't want us to do. When the commandments were there, so like the 10, let's say, deadly sins. 10 deadly sins. As much as we're now walking in grace, there are those things that we know for sure that just even you've tried. So for us, that's what we use to create that balance. Yeah.
I love that, Kadzio. How about you?
I just want to make sure I'm still following the question. Talked about a lot of things.
Hungry.
Yeah. So you're asking if there's a balance between the two, the husband and wife, and like as we parent our children, right? We're good. So I actually was thinking about how you mentioned, there are things about Gabe that have influenced you, and that kind of triggered a thought in my mind of, there are lots of things about Joel's Ugandanness that really have impacted it and just like changed me, like as a person, like as a woman, as even pre-children, right? I'm only 5 months in, right? So I have like this much information about parenting.
So do we, and I'm 2 years in. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, but there are lots of things about just who he is as an individual that have influenced me and encouraged me and even changed my perspective on things. My husband's like a lot more patient than I am in the sense of just like his culture is a slower paced culture.
Yeah.
Just like the African culture in general is just like relaxed. Like everything's okay. Like this is Africa, right? Like everybody's like taking it easy. And so in my American context, I'm very much like, what are we gonna do? What's next? What's next? And so oftentimes he'd be like, hey, like stop asking so many questions, or it's okay, and just like kind of getting me to a place of rest. And I think just in our marriage that has impacted me as an individual, which then I think is going to transfer into how I parent. And so I do think that there is a level of like kind of coming together and allowing the good and the challenging, like you were saying, like how do we see things as teachable moments? And so I think that, yeah, there absolutely is so many elements of who our spouses are that we should take on like as individuals that then will trickle down to our children. So I've definitely seen that in my life.
I think it's pretty much the same for me with everything you guys have said. The only difference is sometimes I feel like there has been a clash of cultures.
Yeah, of course.
Where it's natural for it to happen. So like, and I know it's more likely to happen, especially if it's across borders type of marriage. But for us, it's like sometimes we like if they, and it's little minor things where it's like I could cook ugali like three times a week, and Gabe will be like, again, not because he doesn't love ugali, not that because he doesn't appreciate ugali, he loves it. It's just that for me, like sometimes unaweza kula ugali hadi asubuhi, like that's what would be your breakfast, even ugali and maziwa, so it's not like I've never even questioned, oh yeah, we're eating like that type of that's just a really small incident. So but sometimes I feel like because we have the different upbringings, the different culture, even though he has been in Kenya for going on I think 8 or 9 years or something like that. But even though he's well accumulated to Kenya and he's even learning the language and we're teaching our kids Swahili, it doesn't change the fact that he's still American. Right. It doesn't change how he was brought up as an American African male. So I think sometimes the balance for Gable and I has always been what can we learn from each other? What can we take away and throw away? And that's not always it's not natural. It's not easy. It's not a natural response. It has to be something that you really think about, especially now that we have kids. It's more emphasized because it's like we have to pick and choose what values we want to bring into our home and into our kids. So with the working thing, like example, like Americans are very fast paced. Go, do, to-do list. And I love that work ethic, but I feel like sometimes it can take away from having a community with people. And Gabe's work ethic is also pretty much similar to that. So sometimes I come in and I'm like, hey babe, let's slow down. Let's see if we can go outside and go for a walk. And it's a hard thing for him to do. And the same way he would ask me, hey Charlene, you're slow. Can you pick up the pace? Let's do this. Let's do this. So, and then sometimes I find myself morphing into my husband, and sometimes he finds himself morphing into me. So it's just one of those things where it's like a back and forth thing, and I'm not sure when it ends or if it ends, but does it end? I don't know. So. Maybe, but I think it's such a beautiful thing that even just looking at creation, with how God created us as different peoples, tribes, languages, like there's so many things that his church and his body is so diverse that we're supposed to complement each other. Yes, there will be friction, but we will be like, I think what really humbles me and excites me is knowing that one day I'm going to be praising the Lord with my friends from Afghanistan, my believer friends from, my believer friends from the US who are Caucasian, who are brown, who are black, who are, it's just such a beautiful thing with how God created us. And yes, there's friction. There can be friction, but I feel like if we have a kingdom mindset, it shouldn't take away from, I don't know. I think it's easy to throw away, or put to side the things that don't matter. Does that make sense? But I
have a question, based on what you said. It's in that same thing as the fact that we are all from, let me say, cross-cultural marriages. There's the influence of family. Like, what if your family says this, and your family or his family, they say this and that and that and that? Like, how do you guys handle that? Like, how do you guys handle, like, extended family?
Jalisa?
Because I think for me, like, when me marrying my husband wasn't, or rather me dating my husband wasn't easily accepted.
Sure.
Because we come from different tribes, and
sure.
the tribes that clash the most from this country, you know, like, so.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
okay.
it wasn't a walk in the park,
sure.
like when we were getting married.
Yeah.
And it was so hard because you're just like, I really love these people.
Yeah.
I really want to hear what you guys have to say. But is this mass? It's not a mass. Like, it's not a mass. Like, I can count number of situations, like, even when we were getting married. Like, I remember there's a time someone in my family said, you don't talk to us anymore because of that, like, back and forth. This is what Rob's family is saying. This is what my family is saying. And I'm just like, I'm about to lose my mind, you know? And it's the same thing, like, even when you have kids, like, there are things that your husband's family will say, or your family will say.
Yeah.
And, you know, at first you'll brush it off, but because how us guys are so, like, words have a big place in our lives. So somebody will say, don't do this, but later on you realize you're actually doing the same. And you see how it's hurting your marriage or your children. Like, how do you guys handle that? I can see Charlene smile on her face.
What? Do you have something to say?
I love in-laws, but sometimes, you know, it's not easy.
Yeah. I think so. It's interesting. My mom's never been to Africa anywhere ever. She's also never specifically been to Uganda.
Yeah.
So there's a lot misconceptions and misunderstandings that she just naturally has due to being naive, like not knowing, or things that she's learned from TV, media, in the same way that people have, I don't know, glamorize the U.S. to be something that when they do finally arrive there, they're like, oh, like, this is kind of, yeah. I mean, Charlene I'm sure she had her own perspective of what the U.S. was, and she got there and was like, wait, you people don't talk to each other? Like, why am I in the house all day? Like, what's going on? Like, and just how much more intentional you have to be to build community and make friends and meet people. Where here, I mean, a lot of my friends that have come to the US, they're like, why are people not walking on the street? Because everyone's in a car. Like, so there's all these, again, perspectives that each family will have of the other place that they've not ever been to. And so we definitely encountered that, you know, some of which you're just like, I don't have an answer to what you do about it, but I can tell you what happened to us. Yeah. So, I mean, I remember one of the first questions when we were dating, my mom asked, like, so, like, you're only going to marry one wife, right? And I was like in the back seat and I like looked and I was like,
oh my God,
Mom. And like, Joel was so cool about it. And he was like, we do not believe in polygamy. And I was like, that just happened. Right? So like that happened, you know? And so it feels like such a shocker, but like that's the reality.
Yeah.
Again, ignorance due to naivety, due to not knowing. And I think Joel's mom for me, and I know this is tied to parenting, but this happened and I think it affects everything. But when Joel's mom, she did actually come to the US for the first time, and I met her before I'd ever gone to Uganda, and she sat me down and she looked at me and was like, what do you want with my son? And I'm like, is this supposed to be happening to me? Like, shouldn't this be happening to him? You know? And so I'm just like, what's going on? And so again, these are like in-law situations that we were trying to navigate. And so, but yeah, like there's these misconceptions and things that you're like, how do we deal with that? And then Joel and I had to come together and be like, so now what do we do? Like, I'm so sorry. Did she offend you? Did that hurt your feelings? Or like, Joel's mom was making chapati and she wanted me to roll it out with the rolling pin. Yeah. At this point, I'd never been to Uganda and I don't even know if I had chapati before. And so I'm like, oh, dough. Rolling pin, great. Easy. So I get the rolling pin and I'm doing it, and she comes and she snatches it from me and she's like, do it like this. And I was just like, do it yourself. And I walked out and I was just like, I don't know. So like there's these again as from an African context, you guys are like, you would never do that. You would just be like, yes, ma'am. And you like roll. And I was like, if you wanted to do it, then do it, And so we, again, like these in-law like layers, of course, now trickle down to the children. And so this is actually our first time in Africa right now, particularly Kenya, and Joel's mom came over. So East Africa, right? So we're still like neighbors. And what I've noticed is everyone, including our mom, is like, wrap the baby. The baby's not like warming up because it's kind of cold right now. But I'm like, you do know, like our baby was born in the U.S. like in the winter. He's fine. But I'm like, put on the socks, put on the hat, we're good. But like mom, even as she was going around with us, she'd see me holding baby Joel, and she's like, is he okay? And then finally my husband had to step in and be like, Mom, he's fine. And I'm just like, I don't know what to do. And I felt all this pressure. I'm like, people probably think I'm such a bad mom because I'm like, my baby's just wearing one layer of clothes, no blanket. So yeah, all that to say, like in-laws do have an input. But what I found that Joel and I have had to do from both sides, and my mom, I think from an American standpoint, I think Americans have realize that their kids kind of are going to do what they want to anyway. So they kind of actually say less. I don't know if you've experienced that from y'all's perspective, but like Joel's mom, I think, will be a bit more vocal, but like my mom kind of is just like, well, that's y'all, do your thing, even though she has these thoughts. So Joel and I really had to come together and just kind of filter, like sift through things. It's like, man, mom is showing care and intent and like love, and she like these things are good, but now you and I, husband and wife, what are we gonna do? So we've just had to sift through the in-law chatter and like get to the heart of it, right? Like when my mom was like, you're only gonna marry my daughter, right? Like she doesn't trying to be like mean or rude. She was just trying to be like, I love my daughter and I want to make sure she's safe and protected. It just kind of came out in a weird way. So
I have a lot of cringe moments. You said that, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like some of the things like my mom did or said, and then, but I think there's a lot of misconstrued notions, cultural notions. Sure. And I think that's the biggest thing because people just don't know. Like I remember one of the things I had to warn my mom, like when Gabe and I were planning the wedding, and then my mom was supposed to meet, Gabe's side of the family, and I was like, please don't mention the word fat. Do not call anyone fat. Do not mention anything about someone's weight. Because I know, not that she would, but my mom tends to use that as a compliment, like to kind of get a conversation started. I have that too, Not because she thinks anyone is fat, but just because she wants to compliment you. But with how Americans perceive weight, it's a very sensitive topic. And if you call someone fat, you've pretty much insulted them. So that was like my biggest fear, that from either side, like one would say something to the other. Like my mom would say something to Gabe's mom would say something to my mom.
Sometimes you're not there when they're talking.
Exactly. And when Gabe and I were meeting, like obviously there are times where our family was getting okay, so context. So I met Gabe's dad maybe 2 weeks before our wedding. I met Gabe's mom before, but because of visa issues and whatnot, so some of the things had to kind of go quick. So like the family meetups, the dinners had to be back. Oh, it felt like it had to be back to back just so that we integrated well as a family. So that being said, there are times where Gabe and I would be in the same area that everyone else is in, but we wouldn't try to control a conversation that our parents have with each other. So that's why I gave my mom that warning. That was the first warning I gave her. Please do not say this and this because this will not come off the same way. Was it understood? No. So so it's just one of those things where it's like you have the intent of meaning well, but it doesn't come off that way because you don't understand the other culture.
Right.
And it's the other way around. Like I know we mentioned, like I feel like I had a step ahead because Gabe had been in Kenya before we started dating, before we got married. So I feel like we didn't necessarily have so many of those cultural clashes. But when it comes to dealing with those things, even when they happen now that we have kids and, grandmas love and care for their grandbabies so much, sometimes I have to remind myself that they mean well and I have to respect them. And I think that's the African side of me. And I won't lie, sometimes it's kind of bottled down to going along just to go along because I don't want to I don't want to disrespect my mom-in-law or my dad-in-law or my brothers-in-law. So sometimes I just go with the flow and kind of swallow my own, opinion, don't give my own opinions. And I noticed that what it has led to, the negative side of that is that it has allowed me to compromise some of the things that I value for my family. So what I'm working towards now is if I have an issue, the African in me is I mention it to Gabe. And if Gabe mentions it to the mom, then well and good. But I've learned to not force issues. So whenever we go to the US, which is it's still a foreign thing for my kids. It's such a foreign thing. So acclimating to the US for my kids is different. But I think what I'm excited for as they get older is because they know certain words in Swahili, then they know maji. They would know what maji is before they know what water is. So when we go to the US, I think one of the things that I'm hoping to do is also teach Gabe's side of the family some Swahili words that can help the kids acclimate well to the US. Because they're still young, they still don't have a full scope of what cross-cultural marriage they don't understand that they're both Americans and Kenyans, and that comes with its own set of, sometimes it feels like conditions or whatever. But I think right now I'm more, the first time we went they were a year and some months old, so I didn't really think much into that. But now that they are toddlers, they're 2, they have a better understanding of things, they can speak more. I think I want to be more intentional with making sure that Gabe's, his side of the family also learn more about my side of the family. And because their grandbabies or our kids unite us in a way that allows us to push that even more forward than without them. So I don't know how it will be received. I think it will be received well, knowing Gabe's mom and dad and not so much the brothers. Love you guys. But I think in general, it would be accepted. I just don't know. I don't know how, but I think so. What about you guys?
Our premarital class, one of the things that we learned that I've never forgotten is when dealing with in-laws, let the person from the family deal with that person. So if it's Eddie's in-laws and something happened, then I tell him, and it's for him to communicate with them. Because if I tried and said, if I tried and was like, oh, this happened and this made me feel, it would rub them the wrong way. And it would create even more tension. So what we do is have each other talk to our families.
That's it.
So, for example, there's a time, I think, my son just has a fear of dogs.
Okay.
He likes them from far, and as soon as he sees it coming, he'll be like, wah, 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 wah. I don't know. I think he just doesn't like small things that are moving.
Sure.
I don't know what goes on. So there's a time my mom didn't want him to go somewhere. And she was like, oh, there's a dog. And Eddie looked at me. He just gave me this eyes like, I gotta tell her. And so I told her, we don't encourage using fear tactics to stop him from going somewhere. And we have had a number of things. For example, I didn't know in the Kikuyu culture, when you're breastfeeding, you go somewhere. You don't breastfeed where, let's say, especially his dad or just elders are. Me and my family it's oh, the baby got to breastfeed. Okay. And initially, so I was like, okay, so I guess I cover myself. No, you have to go there. So at first I was like, surely, you want me to go sit in that room alone and breastfeed alone. Yeah. But I understood when he explained it. I was like, oh, okay, I guess that's what you guys do. I'll respect that. So there's that aspect. But then now when it comes to things that would be tinkering with our family and our family dynamic, it's a no for us. We consider our family like this bubble, whether it's made of, let's just say a metallic bubble, because you're not breaking through it. So if it's something that we haven't agreed on or we don't believe in, we're not gonna accept it. You might suggest it, we look at you, smile,
Yeah.
and move on. But we are very intentional in hedging our family and our son specifically.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to our kids, we're the ones who are going to protect them. We're the ones who will shield them. We are the one who will care for their egos and personalities. And especially this 0 to 5, when that's a time they're just coming into themselves and understanding who they are in their own type of way. If we let everybody else come and tinker with their opinions and stuff,
Yeah.
then we mess it. Because I remember there's a time, I think my mom had said something, and she didn't say it in bad way, but you know how you can, like, let's say Washo, you'd say something like, you're so silly. And I'm like, no, he's not silly. He's wise. He's smart. But as much as we understood it was a joke, but at this point, toddlers especially don't know what jokes are. And it might actually go, they might register and somebody else might say it in passing. And they're like, yeah, 2 people have told me this, so it must be true. So stuff like that, we're very intentional about. And I think that's how we handle, in-laws and also friends.
That's good. I think also with the in-laws, if you're speaking to your own family, for example, going back to language, like Joel can speak to his mom in his mother tongue. I can't. Like, even if I want to say, hey, I really didn't like when this happened, simply my inflection, like the way that I said it, like all those things in language transfer. And so I've learned that I prefer to, if I have an issue or something, I prefer to just say, hey, like, can you tell your mom this, or do you mind asking her this? And then they speak in like the mother tongue, and then it's just better. It just comes off better. But then also to what you just mentioned about, you know, things that people say in passing. I've heard even my husband one time will be like, oh, you're so stubborn. And I'm like, he's not stubborn. He's a baby, you know? And he doesn't mean it to say like that, but I'm realizing how the things that we say do impact our children. Even at 4 months, I'm like, no, let's just like not even practice saying that at all. Let's not practice saying any negative things, because we want to encourage, we want to affirm, we want to uplift, because their minds are sponges right now. Like they're taking everything, which is also why I'm like, let's also speak to the baby in the language that we want to like inform them in, because all of these things are being impacted. So I agree with that.
Man, I love this conversation. I don't know. It makes me, I think it challenges me to think things through differently. Like it's not a walk in the park type of thing. It's not as black and white. Sometimes it's gray, and that's where Christ's foundation and biblical foundation comes in to keep you grounded. So I love that. I love that we would still value like the different aspects of our culture, but also have a firm foundation in Christ and what we want to input, or what input we want to have in our kids.
To your point, just there just recently. So this week, like I said, I was with my mother-in-law, and she's like, Jaleesa, you really need to pray before you give the baby the breast milk. And I was like, okay, she was like, you need to pray, but it wasn't. I see your face, but. She said that. Just as shocked. But she said that because she's like, teach your child to pray. You see, he's eating. Are you eating? Do we pray before we eat?
Yeah.
Okay. So now you want to do it. So now everybody's gonna pray. Okay. But that was what she was saying. It wasn't any harm. She literally was like, we pray before a meal, and like we pray before we go to bed. So start just saying, okay, even if it's something as simple as, thank you, Lord, for this milk. Okay, amen. And then let's eat. So she said it maybe one or two times, but I was like, yes, like these are subtle ways that we are instilling values into our children. Just like we're protecting them from language, we're also instilling spiritual disciplines and truths into them. And if I start doing it now at 5 months, then when he's 1 year old and he's actually responding, he might actually have learned how to pray by then, you know, because I said, this is what we do. So there are things like that are really important, in ways that we are shaping our children's like spiritual formation in something as simple as like praying before breast milk.
That just made me realize how important discernment is when it comes to interpreting the things that family or friends say, because that can either make or break a friendship. Because if you don't know the intent of someone and you make up assumptions, like if my mother-in-law told me that, I'll be like, what?
Yo, that's
Clearly, I saw everyone's face. Everyone was offended on my behalf.
But hearing you talk more and explain it, I'm like, no, she is trying to the heart behind it is teaching you how to pray for your baby, or teaching your baby how to pray, or like just
or even
the
encouraging
value.
me how to be a mom,
Exactly.
hey,
with a little thing.
Yeah, something very simple.
I think even it's I would say discernment, and also just being humble enough to learn. Because I think we don't have it all figured out. We can't all have it figured out. So I think it's us willing to be humble, to actually listen to what someone is trying to tell you, because you know, I think nowadays there's this whole narrative, or when somebody tells you something to offend you, you're just like, I cancel you, we are not talking anymore.
You immediately have your guard
like you immediately have your guard up, and it will take time for you to, but I think I like that aspect of what you shared, Jalisa, because it teaches you to be like, okay, what do you actually really mean when you tell me to do something like that? I like it. And
it goes to show the difference between generations. Like how we receive information, or how we receive information that we're given from our parents versus how we give information to our parents. I think the difference in age kind of can cause friction, but learning how to again interpret or look at their heart intent can help bridge that gap. I love that.
Yeah, and I think you guys, and maybe because I'm kind of removed from social media right now, I think my perspective on life has kind of shifted because I have less coming in. But like, because we have so much information, like there's blogs, there's podcasts, there's you know, people that are talking about parenting and how to do this in different styles and different types. Sometimes we forget like how to just not parent so calculated, right? Like, okay, like you know, this type of feeding style, or this type of you know, we said, what were you saying earlier about discipline style, like this versus that. We have all of these formulas, and then speaking of mothers by grace, right, we forget that it's in the small things every day that actually are like forming our children. So how that we respond to them, what we say to them, the languages that we use with them, and then even when it comes, for me, a challenge has been like, how do I'm spiritually like rearing up a human right now. Like I'm literally discipling someone, and I'm like, how do I do that? And so mom's comment was like, that's how you do that. You know, you just say, hey, like, let's just pray right now. Or, you know, one thing that I really value from the Ugandan culture, or I don't know if it's Ugandan culture, but Joel's mom does this, is they have something called family altar, where every night they gather around the couch, which Charlene would love, and they have a hymn, they like sing a song, and then they pray together and maybe take prayer requests. And so I don't know if that's just like a thing that people do, but that was something as an American that we don't do, that I didn't see in my family, that I was like, man, I want to take that. Like, we need to do that. And so even when Joel and I got married, I'm like, we need to have family altar. Like, I don't really know what it is, but we need to do it, you know? So even those little things I want to instill.
I love that.
Man, I can't wait. I don't know if this is too soon to say, but I can't wait to when we can have our parents.
We're planning on having our mothers.
Okay.
I don't know if you should say it or you don't edit it out. I don't know. But Katz, would you like to end us unless someone else?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I have to bring the drama back. So guys, we really hope you enjoyed this episode. We have so much in store this season, and we first of all would like to thank all of you who've been commenting and sharing and hitting our inboxes, and your prayers and your blessings. They mean the world to us, because we're doing this for God, and just to also empower and uplift and encourage moms out there. You're not alone. We're all learning together. With that being said, remember,
Don't be stingy.
So much grace. So much grace. So much grace. So much grace.